And we are live. All right, everybody. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Alex. And I'll just say a few words before we jump right into it. So I'm Yair, and I live in Lower Merion, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. And Alex, myself, and others are basically a coalition of different organizations, including Wait Until 8th, PA Unplugged, which Alex was actually one of the co-founders, the Greater Philadelphia Digital Wellness Community, and more organizations that we're collaborating with. So I just wanted to say a few words before I introduce Alex. We specifically chose to hold this very special webinar with Dr. Richard Fried at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the school year, the first week. We know we all talk to different parents, and we know that this is a very hot topic. You know, what to do with our kids, their fifth grade, their seventh grade. Should we give them social media? Should we give them a smartphone? What will happen if they walk and we can't see where they are? And we think that it's a very time sensitive and also time appropriate discussion to have it on the first week that our kids are back to school. And it's really this more of a discussion. And our goal is to engage more people in the discussion, parents and teachers and school board, members, directors, legislators, and more, because it's really important to understand what is happening around and learn from each other. So we're really lucky that we're going to have Richard Fried today, and we're going to discuss Dr. Richard Fried, and we're going to raise several topics of conversation, including the effect of the screen, smartphones, and media, social media, on the mental and physical health of our kids. So, it's really important. This is not just one webinar. There's a series of webinars, and we're going to have a lot all across the nation and in Pennsylvania and in the greater Philadelphia area, many in-person meetings as well, because this conversation needs to continue. And then one more thing that I'm going to say is that, and we always say this in the beginning of our webinars, we are not some sort of a weird anti-technology cult that is like no screens under no circumstances. And many of us actually work in technology. I'm in healthcare, but I do consulting for AI companies and technology because I'm very interested in this. And also the other point is, so we're not an anti-technology cult. And the other point is that this is not about judgment. We're not here to say, oh, you're bad parents if you're giving your the kid's cell phone or smartphone. We're opening discussions about this and hearing from experts. Our next webinars are going to be researchers from Denmark. After that, medical professionals. So this is really important to have these conversations. And then the last thing I'm going to say about this specific webinar, it is recorded, as I mentioned, and we really welcome you to write. If you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a section of Q&A. So throughout the session, when Dr. Fried is talking, please feel free to ask your questions, type your questions in the Q&A. This session will last an hour until an hour and a half, an hour and 15 minutes, with a hard stop at an hour and 15 minutes to respect your time and the time of Richard Fried. So with all of that, sorry for the long introduction. I'd love to introduce to you Alex, who is an amazing person, a friend who lives only 20 minutes away from here. So Alex is a former educator and current education researcher and analyst. She has experience at the U.S. Department of Education and also at the University of Pennsylvania. She's a mother of two who lives in the Delco province here, township. She's the founder of Delco Unplugged, and she's also the lead person for the Eastern PA statewide PA Unplugged Coalition. She represents thousands of people across Pennsylvania who are working to delay smartphones and create phone-free schools. She's also organizing local regional events, including documentary screenings, panel events, upcoming in the beginning of November, I think, Alternative Device Fair. And she brings professional expertise, personal experience as a parent, navigating also these challenges of raising children in today's technology. So thank you, Alex, for co-moderating.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is truly my honor to welcome Dr. Richard Fried. Dr. Fried is a child and adolescent psychologist who has spent his career helping young people and their families navigate the challenges of growing up. In his clinical practice in California, he's seen firsthand the way smartphones, video games, and social media have reshaped childhood. Many of you know him as the author of Wired Child, and most recently, Better Than Real Life, his groundbreaking new book that pulls back the curtain of how Silicon Valley uses persuasive design to capture kids' attention and the forces in our society that have enabled this and what we can do about it in our communities. And this book was really fantastic. I found it extremely compelling. I highly, highly recommend it to everyone watching. give it to everyone for the holiday season. I just feel like this is so critical that everyone reads this book. What I appreciate most about Dr. Freed is the heart and urgency he brings to this work. He combines science, stories from his practice, and the advocacy parents and educators really need right now to stand up for children's well-being. So we're so fortunate to have him here with us tonight. Thank you so much, Dr. Freed. I'd love to jump in with our first question and kind of we'll go from there. Dr. Freed, you're a clinician, child and adolescent psychologist who's been practicing for more than 25 years. Tell us what you saw in your practice, what you've been seeing that inspired you to write Better Than Real Life.
I just want to say, Alex and Yair, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be here with you and your group. And then to your question, Alex, to be a child and adolescent psychologist in clinical practice for 25 years plus, you can't miss what's happened. You've watched childhood transition from a lot spent in the real world to be pulled, as I talk about in Better Than Real Life, through persuasive design into this virtual realm that is designed. The real world is set up by adults. It's long been set up by adults to help kids. We set up schools, we set up playgrounds, we set up our families, 1,000-year family traditions to all support like raising healthy kids. But we've changed that in the past 25 years with the idea of like we're going to pull kids away from the real world to exist in this virtual domain. And that's Silicon Valley's primary intention, and they use persuasive design, as I talk about, this uh, hidden psychology and technology to do that. So it's changed childhood, and it's not surprising that if you pull kids from an environment where it's designed to raise healthy kids, to put them in an environment that's completely independent of health or concern, but is designed primarily to benefit founders and shareholders, kids are going to suffer, and that's exactly what we've seen. We're seeing epidemic problems with respect to kids' physical health, their emotional well-being, their academic success. Kids aren't essentially doing well, and if you're a clinician in practice, you just can't miss it. All of us, I work together with a team. You just can't miss it.
I want to delve a little bit deeper into persuasive design. I didn't know what that was until I read your book. I'd never heard of that expression before. Apparently, I'm not the only one. I would love to know how you kind of define it in like plain language for all the parents watching who are also, this is very new to them. What is it and why should parents be worried about this?
I've studied technology for a long time. In Wired Child, my first book in 2015, I write a little bit about kind of what the essence of persuasive design, that these technologies are designed by psychologists to manipulate kids. But it wasn't until groups asked me to, develop this program for kids that's going to help them understand what's behind the screen. And then I went down this rabbit hole and really discovered persuasive design. And it's hidden. Silicon Valley and the profession of psychology and neuroscience do everything they can to not tell the public about it, to make sure that what we just see is this shiny veneer of this is a video game, it's a game, this is a social media, this is a place for your kids to communicate. Online video, it's really no different than TV of yesteryear. That's what you hear, but then to go down and to look at persuasive design, and then what I realized is like, oh gosh, like this is so powerful and overwhelming that it's kind of irresponsible for me to like develop just this program to say, oh kids, you're responsible for taking care of this. It's what really became clear is it's on us as adults. But like I think the best way to understand persuasive design is by its key father and founder, Dr. BJ Fogg at Stanford in the late 1990s. Is his website really described it? It's been changed and pulled down because I think they're not so proud of it now. I think Silicon Valley's trying to hide a lot of this, and they see people like my writing and like say, "Oh, we should change it up." But machines designed to change humans. So like aren't we as humans supposed to like be controlling machines? This is about developing machines digital machines, social media, video games, online video, to use the highest levels of psychology to come together with psychology and neuroscience to develop the secret science to alter human behavior and to control it to the effect of now we have kids have left are leaving behind and they continue to leave behind the real world to a tune of by the time that they're teens 8 hours and 39 minutes every single day. Like we've just left behind the real world. Like that wasn't by chance, that was all by design, that was all by persuasive design.
So let me ask you a question because I'm still trying to understand exactly. I think I understand, after reading and watching your podcast, what persuasive design is, but I'll give you an example. You tell me if it fits. So my sister is a clinical psychologist and she deals with anxiety. And I've mentioned before on the webinars that she has tried to implement in her district, to delay, kind of like an initiative, like a wait until eighth, delay smartphones. But by the time that her daughter was ended third grade, she was the last one without a smartphone. And I've seen her with, she's only 9 years old with a cell phone. And it's really, I see that it's hard for her to disconnect. When I myself, and I'm not big on social media, but sometimes on Facebook to, for example, promote webinars like this. But there's this thing that is called Reels. And this Reels is targeting me. It learns what I like, whether it's meditation stuff, whatever, and it's targeting me. But also the Reels are like in a way on Facebook that it's almost like a flick of a finger up. Like I'm telling myself before I go to sleep, I'll just watch a couple of little videos to calm myself down. An hour later or so, or half an hour later, I'm like, oh, my eyes are hurting from watching so much. Is this an example of persuasive design? And are children much more sensitive to this than adults?
Yeah, you're exactly. That's kind of it's essentially a slot machine, that flick up. Nothing, nothing. Whoa, like you're on a variable reward schedule, which just drives the human brain crazy and is responsible for gambling addiction. So that is one of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of techniques now being shaped by AI. We're going to turn AI loose on this and make it even more powerful of persuasive design. And it's very complicated. I'm a clinical psychologist. Have had too much school. I could not walk into a building at Instagram or at YouTube or TikTok and say, I want to be a persuasive designer. This takes particular neuroscience training to be an expert in this. And, I came to the challenge that, like, wow, this is a really difficult science, and Silicon Valley is betting that it's too difficult for the public to understand. And I just stared at it for long enough until I realized that the very essence of persuasive design is to create digital technologies that are better than real life. Of course, not really better than real life, but experienced as better than real life. And not just more entertaining, but this goes, we have evolved for 4 million years as hunters and gatherers. And we essentially have these Stone Age brains. And that means you can hack it. This modern day culture that we live in looks nothing like what humans have evolved in. So that means there's lots of little hacks and human vulnerabilities. And persuasive design consistently goes after those to create these better than real life experiences. So when you're trying to pull a kid away from this, a boy off of a video game, a girl off of social media, because a lot of it's gender-based vulnerabilities. The reason why a young boy will throw a tantrum, an older boy will put his fist through a wall or push the mom that loves him and has cared for him, or a girl will cut her arms up and end up in the hospital when you try to pull away social media, is because this is felt down in their essence and their soul as this is what I should be doing to be a successful human on earth. This is my purpose. I've been convinced by industry that this activity, my life lived online, is what I should be doing to be successful. So your kids and that happens to adults too, and kids are much more vulnerable, but that's why you see such an extreme reaction. You're pulling kids away from what they feel like this is what I should be doing this is what my purpose here is on earth.
In the chapter of your book, Richard, where you talk about kind of like hacking kids' Stone Age brains or hacking kids' DNA to really like make them think that what they're seeing on screens are better than real life. Um, I found it really interesting when you described this idea of like competence or like making boys feel like extremely competent when they're like leveling up in a game, or girls, for example, you said gender-based vulnerability, making them feel really competent when they amass new followers or get a lot of likes. Could you talk a little bit more about that kind of like gender difference and this idea of competence?
Sure. For all of human history, is a boy, is a male in our species, there really was a lot of gender-based strengths and separation of duties. And as a young man, you needed to learn how to hunt and fight and to build shelter. And you needed to do that in your tribe to be set up with a date, to mate. Like if you just sat there or weren't successful in those things, you didn't mate. Like you earned your ability to procreate or procreate with a higher status mate by being effective at these things, by gaining competence in being an effective hunter and builder of shelter. That's why you see a game like Fortnite designed by Dr. Celia Hodent, who has a PhD in psychology. You see the two things, the two major components that you gain success or feel competent for within Fortnite is hunting and fighting, or fighting and then building shelter. So boys feel, and to be a real, to be a successful, 10, 20,000 years ago, to be a successful hunter gatherer was an extremely difficult proposition for males to achieve. Like years of training and going out every morning and the risk of death and serious bodily injury. Nowadays, all you have to do to gain that instinctual satisfaction is to roll over on your bed and play the game. The kids don't even say video game anymore. It's too long. I'm just on the game. And so that is, they are getting this feeling of competence that I am doing what I should be doing on earth to be successful. Meanwhile, we have a generation of boys that they're failing to launch. If we all visited a college in the United States, we would count nearly 60% women and only 40% men. This isn't talked about. Men are struggling. If you have a boy and you want them potentially to be successful, go to college or gain some other trade, and not have them live in your home as a young adult, like these are things that we should really address and understand, and understand that this isn't a game. This is a psychological experiment that we're playing on a generation of boys. And for girls, girls have long had this strength of this relative gender-based strength of social relationships, and that shows up when they're young. And so girls gain this. You can turn this social environment of social media into a what I call a supernormal. You give it a supernormal environment or supernormal stimuli by quantifying and gamifying that environment. It's not just a regular social connection. It's turned into a slot machine of social relationships that girls can't walk away from. Girls, we always lived in these tribes of about 80. Young women in that tribe would be the glue that held everything together. They would make everyone stay together and work together. They had that strength. Nowadays, we're told, oh, you're supposed to go do that online with peers and strangers, which is a lie. But girls get extraordinarily caught up in that because, you're ridiculed if you don't have the appropriate follower count.
This is it's very powerful, and I wanted to ask you, and actually I'm going to share a little secret because I think it's relevant. So, for example, Alex, myself, others are working on different events and Facebook groups to engage more people and have conversations. So, for example, when I'm posting a webinar and we're creating Alexander creating our flyer for the webinar and we're posting it on the groups, I kind of feel anxious, and once in a while I kind of peek and see how many people may be registered, and I go to the Zoom that I created and I see, I wonder how many people, and if I don't see that people are responding or I don't see people, I feel, kind of like almost disappointment, and it's not real life. It's all in the virtual field. I think that probably in the same way, just amplified by a bazillion, if kids, again, my kids are much younger, but I assume that teens, for example, who are posting pictures of themselves or stories, and they're probably even more obsessively looking for some sort of virtual feedback. And to me, that's probably a problem because I know that it affects me.
Yeah, yes, I'm assuming you're a little bit over 18, but
A little bit.
it is uh, life. I mean, for those in my generation to go to high school, to go to middle school, and to live in that environment for 7 hours was extra. It was really difficult then. Um, in many ways, school's a construction. Like, for all of human history, we didn't send 1,000 preteen or teen people to develop their own politics. That was sometimes not real healthy. Like, again, it was a group of 80 that had your back. You all lived together. You all fought together. You all died together. You Everything you did was in the service of your community. So school was tough back then. um, and to be a kid now in that environment that is literally 24/7, it's this is an anxious generation, as Jonathan Haidt appropriately tells us. It has changed childhood, and not for the better. One of the things that we're really deceived about, and again, parents don't know this because the leading voices with respect to this are that are the health organizations are all industry funded or industry aligned. So parents aren't getting this message. One of the messages that they're not getting is that for whether your kid is a preteen or teen or a teen, their primary emotional connection should be with family, not online peers, not strangers. We are told that this is what you're supposed to be doing today, that your kids, you'll hear it over and over from supposed experts, pundits that are oftentimes industry funded that actually protect their own kids and at home, but they're pushing your kids online. But the science is abundantly clear. If you look at Asian family history, Italian family history, Latino family or history, it is all about family, and and that's true whether you're a preteen or a teen. Now it's you just see these addictive devices have kids leave behind their families to live their lives alone in a room, and they're falling apart. Girls especially caught up in more on social media than boys. They are just they're more depressed, more lonely, more anxious, more suicidal than they essentially ever have been. So it's altered childhood, and that's a lot because this is normal today for kids to live on. No, it's not. Kids need their families to be number one, and number one family, number two school. Those are
Mhm.
researchers that study this are just they laugh when they say, "Oh, peer connections." Like they just laugh that off. Like, no, we know. You'll see them write their study up. Like we know peer connections. Like the majority of studies say peer connections don't help. Kids will say, "Oh, I need my BFFs forever." The next week, those kids are turning their backs on them and ridiculing them because they've become too popular, too pretty, too whatever, and their lives fall apart. So it looked really good. So anyway, kids' emotional connections, whether they're preteen or teen, should be number one family, number two school, and we need to get back to that ASAP.
Speaking about school, Richard, I would love to segue into that realm for a moment. A topic that many parents are worried about right now is ed tech and time spent on device. I know that's a phrase you use in your book quite a bit. Time spent on device in school is too much. I hear this from parents daily, especially in this back to school conversation. It feels like every day I'm getting an email saying, what can we do about this? Like, is it too late? Like, is this already baked in? My kids are spending 5 hours on their Chromebooks. Like, why are the kids on iPads at indoor recess? It's all feels like it's all happened all of a sudden, and you discuss this, and I would love to hear you talk a little bit about what the research says about how kids learn on screens versus traditional teacher-led instruction. I would love to just kind of start there and hear about the research you've done into this.
Sure. The reason why kids are shifting, just real quick, the reason why kids are shifting onto screens at school, follow the money. It's all about money. It has nothing to do with research. Um, it has every ed tech is a gazillion dollar business that owns the people that are making the curriculum, they're the ones that are paying to lobby for this while they say we're there to help your kids. It's all um, it's driven by money. There's so much money to be made in shifting kids away from human teachers and paper and pencil, and an individual teacher that cares for you onto this screen platform that is the same screen platform that 100 million kids sit in front of all day. Like, um, and the research says that's abundantly destructive. Uh, the OECD, which is like objective research, clearly says the more kids that use computers at school, the less well they do. It's time to push back against ed tech. People are um, really waking up to how this works. Emily Churkin is really good with that. Um, she's a really good resource. She helps families um, push back against this type of stuff. And as I talk about in my book, if you look at where the wealthy tech elite have gone to school and they send their kids, they are human-based schools with, yes, they have technology, but it's a 3D printer that did that. It's not your kid. Your kid gets to interact. These kids are sitting there bragging about how much of social interaction that they have with their teacher in a 12 to 1 student to teacher ratio school. I think is if public schools continue down this road, I think a world of parents, I hope schools realize this, a world of parents is literally going to pull their kids out of school and either homeschool them, or if they have money, send their kids to private schools where they are actually interacting with the teacher. Schools are shooting themselves in the foot. I think teacher unions need to wake up and realize, oh, let's bring in all this stuff. Like the end game here is to replace you.
Mm.
So and replace you with a product that doesn't teach your kid as well. So yes, and then kids at the pandemic was let's put kids on screens. That was a nightmare. You should see the look at the results of kids learning on screens. Um, Kids have gone years backwards. Like they don't read anymore. They can't do math. Like all this objective research, and yet the people who control your curriculum, the people who are running the show at your kid's school, I would look behind the screen and see that they're actually industry funded. And that's why no matter what you do, you're going to get more and more screens. We need to have parents control the curriculum and teachers.
Yes. Totally agree. I found it very interesting. You talk about, and you kind of mentioned this, but you talk about the education that Mark Zuckerberg got, for example, and the education that Bill Gates, you know, provided for his kids. And I just remark, I'm always just remark that there's so minimal technology. For example, at Phillips Exeter Academy, where Mark Zuckerberg went to high school, they use the Harkness method where they all sit around a table and discuss. There's no technology to be found. They discuss concepts and ideas and they debate. Um, and I just find that really interesting to contrast that to a summit learning type of experience. And you talk about this example of a school in Brooklyn where students actually staged a protest, right? Is that right? There was a like a
Right.
walkout.
Right.
Um, and I think what parents are kind of wondering is like, well, where do we go from here? It feels like if, our districts have already spent all this money on these platforms and on these curricula, and like, what do we do? And I guess I'm curious, do you have a perspective on that? I know you shared a really great resource of checking into Emily Churkin's work, and she's fantastic. That's the screen time consultant. Um, but do you have thoughts here about, what are the ways that, parents can kind of like um, organize together and like and kind of bring this united front back to schools?
Andy Liddell is an attorney that like the Ed Tech Law Center. I can't remember their exact name, but like
Mhm.
they are a good resource for families that are really disturbed by um, kids. Inevitably get exposed to all sorts of stuff. Their information is collected illegally. They're exposed to really horrible things at early ages, and the schools are responsible for that. And is Andy Liddell, who's a great attorney, is really showing that um, there's legal solutions to this. Um, I think we need to, and you were naming all these people. Like the New York Times just had this bit that um, out in front of Mark Zuckerberg's house in Palo Alto, this compound of houses that he's buying, families kept seeing kids sort of seeming, it looked like they were on a school schedule. Zuckerberg had his own based like school for his kids and other kids, and there's evidence to suggest it was Montessori based, which is typically less screen based. So like the whole point of my book of Better Than Real Life is it's so much about your kid is going to get one childhood, my tech elite, wealthy, typically white kid is going to get another. It is a racist, prejudicial system, and I think that needs to get talked about. Why are you getting one childhood? Why are you getting one education, and why is my kid getting another? Um, and getting to schools, I think I think you're working with groups. It a slam dunk is to get phones out of school. They never belonged in school.
This
There's
was my
always
this
been
was my
evidence.
next question, Richard.
Sorry, but Yair mentioned that that's the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
That's a key place to start. That is the A screen that ed tech wants kids to be on their phones all day, or some other screen. It's always been clear that phones are a distraction, that they hurt kids, academics. It's a slam dunk. Um, Big states like New York and California are making strong. They're saying phones need to be away from bell to bell, which needs to happen. It's not. Don't put it on a teacher to say try to wrestle a phone out of a kid's hand. It should be bell to bell all day. Put phones away. So that's a place. And I'm upset about. And if we want to go back to the I think you go to, as I talk about in my book, you can go to your school, you can go to the superintendent and say, why is my kid getting this program? It's essentially giving my kid a load of screen time at home. It's distracting my kid. Research says that this is going to hurt my kid's schooling, um, and I think that the parents need to speak up and come together. When we're talking about don't try to do this alone, but do this as a group and a community. Understand that there are so many parents that share your views. I guarantee you can come up with a coalition at your school of caring parents that think just like you do.
Yes. And thankfully, we do have that. There are communities just like this all over Pennsylvania. And we are really thrilled that there is legislation that's going to be introduced bipartisan and bicameral in our Commonwealth this fall. So it's very exciting, and we're very hopeful that it will be successful. One thing I wanted to ask you, you know, those who are against a bell to bell, so phone free for the whole day type of policy, say that it goes too far. Parents sometimes need to be in contact with their kids during the day, or in the event of an emergency situation, a horrific event like a school shooter. Kids need to have phones on them in case they need to, make sure, let their parents know they're okay or alert first responders. And then others say, well, and also kids need to learn how to regulate these devices and learn how to use them responsibly. So I would just love to hear what you have to say to those kind of like those detractor arguments.
Um, Oftentimes these sort of like seemingly common sense, like, oh, kids need a phone to be able to navigate. They need a phone to be able to check the time. That is always industry's foot in the door because they don't intend that. They want kids to go down, like I said, the 8 hours, 39 minutes for the average kid, 10 hours for Black and Latino kids. That's what their end goal is. Understand that their little foot in the door, they know that when kids go check this little thing, that they are gone and down a rabbit hole, potentially lost their childhood. Again, I would go look to see, let's see how the Phillips Exeter Lakeside, where Bill Gates' kids went, and he went, um, these are places where the schools are designed around the human connection, and there's so many places. And there's actually research, the experts on the crazy, unfortunate, which is not going to happen to your kid, but God forbid it does. But there's the real school safety experts say that your kid is less safe on a phone. They're sitting there doing this. They're not listening to instructions. They've lost situational awareness. How many kids have walked? We all see it every day. How many kids walk out into and kids, a lot of kids have died doing this. They walk out into these are addictive devices. You walk out into the middle of a street and you get hit by a car. Like, sold to you is it's going to improve your kid's safety. The reality is it is detracting from our kids' safety. It's detracting from our kids' ability to navigate life, to succeed, to go to school, to be emotionally healthy. And I can understand, if we all care about our kids, and the industry knows that, oh, your kid, you need to be in touch with your kid. That old system of go to the office and check in. Like, I have families that say, like, oh, I did that, and that works much better than trying to reach my kid. Because what you have is, you know how many parents say, but by the time their kid gets phone addicted, I reach out to my kid and they don't get back to me because they've lost their family, but they've left their family behind by the time they're 13 or 14. They're living amongst peers. They could care less about what their family is. They don't respond. Giving your kid a smartphone is a great way to lose your kid, not to keep them in reality be safe.
This is great and super interesting. I wanted to talk about, Richard, about something a little bit different. So I just shared a link for a study that I found very interesting. So I'm a cardiologist, and recently, in the last year, couple of years, I work in Philadelphia in an urban center, and I've noticed I work mostly in the hospital, and I've noticed more and more younger and younger and younger patients presenting with conditions, including heart attacks, that previously you would see in the people in their 40s and 50s. And there was a week or 2 weeks that I've seen almost back to back a patient who was like 22, 20, another one 24, who had heart attacks, not just risk factors, but heart attacks. And at the same time, it was amazing coincidence. I saw this study that came out of Denmark, and that's the one that I posted. And what they're talking about, and I think that it's, you don't have to be a cardiologist or physician to read it. It's to learn about, it was in one of the major cardiac journals, but it talks about how in children in the last 10 years or so, because of the smartphones, social media, screens, you see a lot more risk factors: obesity, diabetes, hypertension, hypolipidemia, anxiety, etc. So this, I think, is real, and we see some studies from it, including from Denmark. The question that I have to you, Richard, is, you're talking a lot about, more what's happening in schools, but I want to go back to your practice. You're a clinical psychologist. You deal with children, adolescents, families. I want to hear from you, perhaps examples of issues that you're seeing now that you attribute, that kind of kindled your passion and fire about all the smartphones and screens. Maybe you can share with us a few examples, or, maybe not specifically patients, but kind of tell us more about what you see in your day-to-day practice.
A lot of the kids that I work with are from a working class community. Um, and the screen time rates, as I said, in Black and Latino kids are much higher than white kids. And those kids are, Black and Latino kids are, their obesity rates. White kids have stayed a little bit about the same, maybe up a little bit. The obesity rates in Black and Latino kids are absolutely scary, and so many of my kids that I see in my practice are suffering and um, like exorbitantly overweight. And I work in this mixed practice where I interact with pediatricians, and it just, they are extraordinarily worried about what is happening to this generation of kids that's living their lives on screens rather than being physically active. So yes, it's a really serious problem. I'm the American Academy of Pediatrics. Their science-based group will say screen time is a risk factor for obesity, which is a fact. What's tragic is the media-based side, led by Dr. Megan Moreno at the American Academy of Pediatrics. Dr. Moreno's been funded by Facebook and Instagram, She has said screen time is less important, or their group has said screen time is less important. The American Academy of Pediatrics has like two different types of science, which is putting kids at risk. We need real scientists. We need the American Academy of Pediatrics to step up and actually speak for science. And you know who's suffering the most are these are kids of color and these kids of less advantage. And screen time, of course, is it's like I think every parent knows that. It's commonsensical. If you sit and you lay on a screen and don't exercise and don't move, we all know that you're going to develop all sorts of physical health problems, and it's really disturbing to me. Yair, I so much appreciate your work, but you and I both know you can't do heart surgeries on everyone. Like you know that primary prevention would save millions of lives. It would protect all these kids from actually having be at risk for early death, be at risk for diabetes, be at risk to lose limbs and go blind. Like, yes, we need to act now, get back to the common sense understanding that screen time poses a risk for kids' physical health and act on that now. That's a slam dunk. Every organization, any child health organization that doesn't say screen time is a risk for your kids' physical health is hurting kids physically and honestly putting them at risk to have really serious physical health problems before they hit adults, and then when they hit adults, just be set up for a life of disease.
But what about this is, interesting and concerning, of course, but what about, so you address the physical, but what about, what do you see as a psychologist in terms of the common things that you do associate with, again, social media, for example, or many hours of video games, Fortnite, you mentioned, or just being on the smartphone and texting and Facebook and all that? What are some examples or things that you live in your daily practice in terms of how it affects the heart, the emotion, the soul of the child?
Kids, when you hand, and this gets back to what Alex is doing, when you hand, the industry tells you to give, just hand your device over to your kid. When you hand that smartphone over to kids, watch the real world disappear. Watch them leave behind family, school, going outdoors, even leaving their room to engage in real life. These devices are truly addictive, and industry will tell you that they are attention stealing, and that's why the top of the industry aren't going there. So my practice is filled with parents who are crying in my office because their daughter's depressed, their daughter's cutting, their daughter ends up in the hospital, their son um, is set up to live a life as these are families that don't have a lot of money, but the sons won't work or go to school, and they're living a life on a video game. And industry would say, "Oh, just intervene." We're talking a 200-pound kid that threatens to kill the family when you try to set a limit, or a girl that ends up in the hospital and carves up her arms because you took away her phone. Like the way to prevent all this stuff is to act early by limiting the time when we give kids devices. And I understand so many parents haven't, the industry has hidden all this stuff from you, and all these healthcare groups funded by industry have hidden this from you. I write about that in a Substack article. So we can go to our kids and say, I've kind of been deceived by people, and the world's figuring this out. We're finding new science. We're gonna, we're gonna give you a smartphone. We've given you a smartphone for a little while. We need to replace that with if you do need a phone at some point, we're gonna give you a phone that allows you, like, that doesn't have internet access. Don't give your kids smartphones and say, oh, I'm gonna, like, oh, lock it down. That doesn't work ever. Like the kids break that, the jailbreak it within 20 minutes, and they are living their life. As soon as a kid has a smartphone, they have found a way to break that, to get over the way to do this is to not give these kids access to devices in the first place, because industry really doesn't want you putting those limits, so they really don't design. So if your kids need a phone to be able to text emergency or text you to say I need to get picked up or call emergency services, give them that phone when they get older. Don't give them a smartphone that has internet access. There are phones that have that capability.
So I'd love to start transitioning to the Q&A because we have some great questions coming in, and one of them actually just works really well with the follow-up, which is, at what age would you recommend families introduce smartphones?
Um, I like Jonathan Haidt's research when you see what he says. It's interesting. I think he tries to compromise and say when you hear him talk, he's like, let's put it back as far as possible. And these or Jonathan Haidt's research, Gene Twenge's research shows us, and thousands of studies show us when you give kids smartphones throughout their teen years, when you give them a smartphone at 16, at 14, it poses risk to their mental health, like all throughout childhood. So I know we're in a really difficult spot. The world has deceived parents and said, go ahead and give these devices. They're great for your kids. Parents are in a really tough position. I love what you're doing here at Greater Philadelphia Digital Awareness. Like, as Yair says, let's start engaging in this discussion. Let's come together um, and start having this conversation and develop a quorum and a group that we're going to start making our own decisions together. But I understand we're put in a difficult spot. So I want to say, honestly, as I write about in my book, 18 is better than 16, 16 is better than 14, and so on. The farther we can put those, there is no safe age when you give kids a smartphone. They always pose risks, especially to girls' mental health and to boys' academic success, and to all kids to their to child obesity and all the consequences that Yair is dealing with as a cardiologist. It's so there you go.
And
Those
would you
devices are designed to increase screen time,
would
and
you say the same for
screen time always poses a risk to your kid.
God,
Always.
sorry, I talked over you there. I was curious if you felt like the same for social media as well. We had a question come in or a comment that said, there's strength in numbers, and if we, encourage our and limit social media, restrict it from girls especially, and encourage friendships in real life, it's so obvious that they need to stay off these platforms. Would you also say, as far from childhood as you can? Um,
Exactly. There's solid research that say young adult, especially girls, that spend more of their time on social media. Their adults are more depressed, more lonely. Those products are designed to make kids feel empty. The way they work is they don't make you feel good about yourself. They make you feel empty inside. So you need to use them more. Like that's the advertising model, that's the marketing model. It doesn't fulfill you, it makes you feel empty and lost. And I need to, so yes, as far as we can push it back, join organizations that it's so hard to do this as a parent by yourself, but yes, take action to do this as in a strength in numbers, as you say.
And I have a follow-up question. This is also related to the age limit, in your opinion, of or when should we start with social media for children? And I just want to give a shout out that one of the attendees here is Laura from Vermont. And Laura, as you may know her, she's been doing a lot of national work and leading different initiatives, and she's working with legislators. And when I had an hour and a half conversation with her a couple of weeks ago, and what she told me was like, it shocked me because she said that she, in her mind, she's starting to work with legislators potentially on an initiative that would limit social media to 21 and above, meaning to start. And I was shocked. But then, when we spoke more about it, well, you're not allowed to drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes or, things of that sort until
Or
you're 20.
gamble.
Why would you be able to use something that is clearly so harmful physically, mentally, etc.? So what are your thoughts about doing something? Do you think that the world is moving? Europe is clearly, especially Scandinavia, is more advanced than us in the United States. But do you think the world is moving towards limits on social media to that degree?
Yes, as far as I think Australia is going for 16 for social media. Scandinavia is taking action. Yeah, the farther we can put it back, it's interesting. I think we're gonna parents are. I think what's gonna happen is parents are gonna limit this and say, "Holy cow, my kid is thriving. My kid actually wants to be with me. We go for a ride in the car. I can talk with my kid." Why in God's name would I want to change that? My kid comes to dinner. My kid wants to be with family. My kid cares about visiting grandmother. You give a kid a smartphone, all of that is at risk. So watch your kid disappear from all those family elements. Watch your kid disappear from caring about school. Understand the realities of what giving a smartphone is. And I think what's going to happen is we push it back and say, why in God, my kid's thriving. Why would I hurt my kid now? So yeah, I think we're going to get to a place where that happens. And I know Laura, and Laura does great work. And yes, I totally respect Laura. Thank you so much for all you do. And Laura has it right. I've spoken with Laura as well. She's part of a lot of really good organizations. Um, I think part of Smartphone Free Childhood, um, uh, Fair Play's Screen Time Action Network is also a really good group. Screen Strong. These are all organizations that are building a community that parents, this is all science based, but I think parents know in their heart, parents are starting to say, wait a minute, I've been kind of sold on this propaganda. I know in my heart what's right for my kid, and I'm going to go with that.
Yes. Another one I just wanted to shout out the Distraction Free Schools Policy Project, which Laura is also at the heart of. Just really amazing people doing work to build state coalitions to address these issues. It's really inspiring. And if you're curious, you should join the Wednesday calls at noon. I usually can't join because I'm at work, but sometimes I'll try to pop in. It's always very inspiring. Um, so I wanted to ask a question from Jill Anderson in the chat. What is a good response or good resources for community and school board members that perceive this as a parenting problem? Our district sends kids home with one-to-one iPads and has a weak smartphone policy. I'm trying to help people realize this isn't just parenting.
I agree. Um, Better Than Real Life, my book. I think it has two primary interventions or things that I'm bringing forward that the world doesn't know. One is there's this veneer of entertainment and games that industry doesn't look at it like that. It is these it's they look at it primarily as manipulation. The people that actually it's not a game developer that controls what your kid sees. It's a psychologist or neuroscientist. They're the ones that truly pull the strings. The other element that I talk about is that the leading health organizations in our country that claim to protect kids are not who they say they are. They are industry funded. When the 70% of schools have common sense media at them, they have the world's best PR. They are tens of millions of dollars. Their primary organization is an ed tech lobbying group. They are there to put screens in schools. So when you are a parent and you're wondering why in God's name is this so hard for me, you're up against common sense media, which says we're here to protect kids, but that's a disguise for their true nature, which is we are actually here to push screens in schools. So we need to get common sense media out of kids' schools. The irony is their founder and director, Jim Steyer, uh, raised his kids with extraordinarily strong screen limits, while common sense media says screen time's not really an issue. It's again all of this like my privileged tech elite kid is going to get one childhood, your kid is going to get another. That applies to home and that applies to school. We need to make sure the people that are involved in the health of our kids have no connection with industry. Common Sense Media is funded by has been funded by millions of dollars by Zuckerberg. And what do you know? They push social media on your kids. They have tried to keep phones in school. Like we need to understand what we're up against and start acting as those are people that have deceived us and betrayed our kids. So understand what they're doing. Step up as a parent, knowing what you know is right, and say like, I'm going to take action, and I'm not going to listen to this group. And in fact, we need to get common sense media out of our kids' school because it's unethical and illegal to have a PR organization selling teachers and kids on screens during the school day. Why in God's name would we have that?
Before I read the next question of Jill Duffy, I wanted to ask a follow-up question. You were talking about different organizations, and you mentioned the American Psychological Association, but what specifically, there's this organization, the AACAP, and I've spoken with several members of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Are there no people in leadership who are seeing the reality as you and participate in writing guidelines, for example, or public statements that are seeing more eye to eye about the damage of the screen, social media, physical, mental, all of that? Is it all this whole big organization of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, as an example for an organization, are all brainwashed in a way that they just can't see the reality?
I know that organization less. The main culprits that I describe in my book and that I describe in my recent Substack article, the trusted health organizations undermining or selling out our kids. um, Common Sense Media, the Digital Wellness Lab run by Michael Rich, funded by it looks like a Las Vegas trade show of who TikTok, Instagram. I think it has funded him. Like a whole bunch of social media, Meta has funded him. Common Sense Media, Zuckerberg, and EdTech. It's an EdTech organ. The American Academy. Here's this American Academy of Pediatrics. I can't believe what they're doing. Apparently they don't have an attorney that cares about that organization because they have um, their science-based group doing peer-reviewed research that says screen time puts your kids at risk for obesity and, of course, type 2 diabetes. And then here we have Zuckerberg funded, or I'm sorry, Instagram, Facebook funded Dr. Megan Moreno saying screen time is not really an issue. Like that puts the American Academy of Pediatrics to get its like tail suit off. Like you're saying screen time is not a problem, and treating kids for all these screen related obesity is extraordinarily expensive. Like, so as I talk about in my book, there are 1,000 really good peer-reviewed researchers who care about kids and are doing the real research, like you talked about from Scandinavia. But then we have Silicon Valley going way out ahead and making sure they've bought off essentially these key figures that essentially twist around the research and deceive parents. So there's real science out there, and then what parents are fed though is they're being deceived.
Understood. Okay, so the next question of Jill Duffy. So she mentions that her question is, how are we educating our children, the children themselves, about the dangers? Like, how are we, not just by putting barriers and bell to bell and social media, but how are we directly educating our kids about the dangers of screens and social media? Because she says, as an example, her kids are getting tired of hearing her, speak about it, and other people speak about it all the time. And what type of conversations, how do we flood this and actually have a conversation with the children, what age perhaps? And I will, embarrass Laura again, because when we spoke, she told me about her daughter, who's only 14 years old, who wrote a beautiful essay that
I
was
saw that.
published about, you may have read it, some of you may have read it, about how she is actually seeing the benefit and the beauty of the fact that she is not connected to smartphones and social media, and how she sees the benefits that she reaps over other children who are connected all the time. So again, the question of Jill is, how do we engage the children, our children, with these conversations and important concepts?
Um, right now, parents need to know what they're up against. Um, our kids are being fed misinformation by the American Academy of Pediatrics. They are being fed misinformation by Common Sense Media. When they go to school, they are fed the Common Sense Media digital citizenship program. Again, this is an organization funded by Zuckerberg. And if you look at the seventh grade Common Sense Media digital citizenship program for kids, seventh graders are typically 12 years old. That program shown to kids at school is shoving social media down kids' throats, saying, like promoting the benefits of it and showing these kids as role models, talking about how important social media is to them. Parents cannot combat that. We need to get the liars and the betrayers of childhood out of the messaging. We would have never tolerated this throughout human history, to have people undermine childhood, but it's now done under the guise of we're helping your kids. Look really what's behind the screen. Look who's funding this organization. And then, yes, we need real um, we need real truth tellers to help children understand that that they're being led around like by puppets on a string, and that the people behind the screen are controlling them. So yes, we need truly independent. Um, and a lot of times, you call it sort of like media literacy, and we make a mistake when when we're teaching kids about media literacy, and it's like all about how to use screens better. That's a mistake. When kids are living 8 hours and 39 minutes and dying from obesity related illnesses as they become young adults, we don't need to do that. We need to help. Media literacy needs to be about helping kids understand how this is pulling them away from the real world. And churches and for the life of me, I can't understand at this point why houses of faith are not stepping up more. I think that they've been overwhelmed by this message. Like religion has always been about supporting culture. Like I think this is a place for houses of worship to step up and say, we know life should be built around family and work and school and not living your life with false prophets on a screen. Like, where is I think this needs to happen more in faith-based communities and and places where families go to hear the truth.
But let me just push before the next question. Let me just push on because you're obviously very passionate about, all the tech industry and the damage that they're causing, the financial biases and interests. But I want to push a little bit more on what Jill said. So how do you suggest specifically for us, let's say I'm a parent of a 10 years old, 12 years old, how do we engage with these kids who are freaking out and maybe they're the last kid without a smartphone? And how do we have this conversation? What resources do we have?
Parents are put in a really tough position. We need to understand the developmental vulnerabilities of kids. For all of human history, we never allowed, if you were a tribe, a hunter gatherer organization for which humans lived in, if you had an organization or like a group move into your community to obviously undermine kids, they would not be there for long. They'd be lucky to be run off. Today, we're supposed to accept it. We know how vulnerable kids are, and to put kids in that really difficult place that you are, I was a kid too. Um, that's why phones need to be completely out of school. Like, I made my mom or asked my mom to drive 20 miles when we didn't have very much money when I was a kid to get a pair of sneakers that my family probably couldn't afford with my parents in grad school, and my mom did that. But there is so much social pressure to fit in, and I had a seventh grade. I can stand up for myself now. I could not stand up for myself when I was a seventh grader. Um, when I was in high school, I will never let somebody as an adult be bullied in front of me. I watched that happen when I was on the football team at even as a junior and senior in high school. I did not have the strength to stand up to the bullies. We can't ask kids to do that. We've always been understanding that in the United States, you can't run for president until you're 35 years of age. We've always known that wise adults make decisions for youth, and we shouldn't be putting this on youth. And that's why schools have a responsibility, parents, our government has a responsibility, so that me as a seventh grader or even as a junior or a senior, that I don't have a voice. I'm kind of like a quiet kid. I haven't found myself. I don't have a prefrontal cortex to understand this stuff. I don't have a My soul is not developed, and I don't understand completely right from wrong. We can't be. This is beyond kids' developmental understanding. If you put a bunch of kids around, you can talk to your kids till the cows come home about not to vape and not to use drugs. If you put them around a good kid, around a lot of kids doing that, they're going to be doing that. I mean, maybe a few kids that have a minority of kids might have the strength and will to be able to push back, but like that puts kids at risk. And we need to understand that we have a responsibility as a community to take action. So I'm sorry, we've really put a lot of this on individual parents. Understand that like these tech elite, like we're going to purposely send our kids to these schools where they have limited screens, and send them to the extracurricular places where all these parents are together, where they limit screens. Like they understand that like kids need to be in this protected group, and all parents need to be sort of offered that that amazing life that all kids need.
So critical. I'd love to try to address a couple of questions at once in the remaining 8 minutes that we have. I first want to this point about I really like changing the culture. Obviously, this is a huge Herculean task to kind of combat this like crushing social pressure that you're talking about, Richard. Jennifer says, how do families band together in changing the culture by not giving kids smartphones? And I would say you have to find your people. You really, and in Pennsylvania, we have an amazing resource called PA Unplugged. So check it out, paunplugged.org. And we're now connected with 15 parent groups across the state. And if you are watching this and you're not connected with us, please email me like right now. I would love to hear from you. And the people in communities, whether it's a wait until eighth chapter, okay to delay, another unplugged movement, Mothers Against Media Addiction. If you are wanting to rally your community about delaying smartphones and social media, talk to your neighbors, start talking to people in your community. People care about this. So I just wanted to kind of
And
address.
Alex, I would say 2 years ago, people would have said like, "Oh, good luck to you." The anxious generation has really opened up, and Gene Twenge's work, Jonathan Haidt, the anxious generation, and states and the world is waking up to this. Like a quorum is developing, a critical mass, like it's happening. So just go with that.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the anxious generation absolutely like lit a fire under all of this, and I think it really allowed us to find each other and like start having these conversations with legitimacy. Now I'd like to kind of switch the conversation a bit again, and my bias is young children and kind of like trying to mitigate this disaster before this is like really relevant for my kids. I want to talk a little bit about older kids. I feel like parents of older kids, and I'm talking teens, like 15 to, 14 to 17, let's say, are put in a really tough position because, again, 2 or 3 years ago, when it was time to give kids devices, that was the norm. The average age of giving kids a smartphone is around 10 and a half in Pennsylvania. So, like, most 11-year-olds have a phone. It's a common, like, graduation from fifth grade present. I know like we are really working to change that norm, but that is still very much a norm. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the parents who, made that choice because everyone was doing it and that was the norm. What can you say to those parents who have a 15-year-old with a smartphone who's like very much like that's entrenched in, their identity and that's how they communicate with friends? What can parents do there? What are the signs that maybe screen time has crossed into harmful territory? What are the warning signs that parents should pay attention to? Um, and I'd also just love to know, like, what do you have to say to parents to kind of like help them manage this, like bring some balance to this conversation besides like taking the phone away, right? Just like what are ways that parents can kind of manage this in this reality of, yeah, you've had your smartphone now for 4 years. What are we going to do about it now that I know all of the harmful impacts? Sorry, I
Um,
know I'm giving you like a lot there.
no, this is what I'm a clinician in practice. This is what I work with every day. Um, Firstly, I would encourage, if it's okay with you as a parent, I'd have everybody watch The Social Dilemma.
Mm.
That is tech industry experts talking about how we built this environment to manipulate you as kids. Kids hopefully do not like to be controlled, and they can gain some insight about that. There are youth organizations that kids can find online where kids are working to spend less time on devices. Um, um, I'll think of his name in a minute, but like there's a lot of young adults who are saying there's like groups that are like Cal Newport. This does works a lot, especially with young men who are trying to be off of their devices. So when kids are older and understand that, um, as a parent, I would work that whole phenomenon where we are carrying a phone around all the time and our kids sort of have to come through that phone to interact with us. Like, let's rethink that. Like that, or when we are watching a movie or going for a walk with our kids. Like we really, persuasive design gets us all. It gets me. Um, we as adults but a lot of parents will say, I can't walk away from this. So we need to really come face to face with what is persuasive design, how this device is controlling me and potentially pulling me away from, my kids have one time to go through childhood and adolescence, and I'm finding myself really distracted. What can I do to take action? And tell your parents, I'm going to do this. Or tell your kids, this is what I'm going to do as a parent. I would like for us uh, to be a family, and tell your kids straight up that the science is your connection with family. Even I do this every day in my practice, and kids understand this. Like they're deceived, but when they really hear their family should be number one, even when they're 16 years of age. I talk about the NFL draft during COVID to these big guys that I see in my practice. The NFL draft during COVID, they went to the first round guys' homes because they didn't want to put them together in his organization. And those guys are 22 years old, 300 pounds, could pick me up and spin me around. And I tell these kids, who are they sitting next to on a couch? Their mom and their dad. You should still be, or their moms or whatever, like the family member. Like that needs to be us. So you're really encouraging that. And another thing is, if families can go away on vacation and say like, let's be off of our devices. When we go, we're going to take a trip, and I'm going to work to be off mine. Let's you be off yours, and then when you come home, I'll bet you $50. That was a really good time, and like let's work to continue that.
Oh, yeah, you're muted.
Am I
I'm
muted?
sorry.
Oh, okay,
No, I
okay.
was muted. That really happens to me. I thought I figured it out by now. But listen, it's almost time. And first of all, I wanted to apologize for all the amazing parents, those who asked so many questions that we're not going to get to, unfortunately. But there's so much interest, Richard, that if you're interested, Alex and I would love to host you for another hour. There's been a lot of people here, a lot of interest, and a lot of people are going to see this recording, and we're happy to continue this conversation. The last thing that I'm going to say, and maybe end with this
I'm
question,
happy to be back. You guys, this is you guys really understand this really well. I'm happy to be back with you
and you're
guys.
super passionate. It's like it's so much
Thank
fun to
you.
hear you. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a fun topic, but it's excited to hear you. So the last question that I'm going to ask is by Kristen from Pennsylvania, who was actually one of the co-founders of PA Unplugged, and she talks a little bit. She texted a little bit about the really the medical society community is failing parents. The peds waiting rooms and ERs are filled with parents, kids, babies looking at screens, and it's really terrible. If you, Richard, had a magic wand, what would you implement poof, immediately for primary prevention? If there's one thing that you could do immediately.
That the medical community actually needs to follow science. The American Academy of Pediatrics, like I said, that with Megan Moreno driving media policy, it's essentially like having McDonald's and Coca-Cola funding the American Academy of Pediatrics that provides you dietary guidelines. That is ridiculous, laughable, obviously harmful, but the American Academy of Pediatrics thinks it's okay. That's horrendous for childhood. They should be embarrassed, and I can't believe that organization allows that to happen. They got taken over in 2016 by a rogue group of media aligned or industry funded aligned. That organization can't allow that to happen. I've reached out to them and said that they can't do that. They essentially turned their back on me. And just rejected that. That is an organization I believe that's at risk for putting themselves into legal trouble. And then the APA. The APA, the American Psychological Association. I'm a psychologist. Like they are supposed to a health organization, but they are but they're also a professional organization trying to put psychologists at Facebook and Instagram. So they can't say, a psychologist, you can't hurt kids, so they can't actually speak the truth because they're a professional organization. You can't do that. Like, that is remarkably unethical as a psychologist and a psychological organ. It's completely against the APA's ethics, but they just go forward with this. It's an embarrassing time. It's sort of like the when the medical community really in the 50s would unfortunately align with the tobacco industry, and they were really embarrassed later. We're in that situation now, and it's disgusting. People should wake up. I call it the Silicon Valley exception. Oh, these social media companies must be there to help kids, and therefore it's okay to uh, align with a corporation. No, it's not. Like, anyway, they should just follow their own ethics, and do what's right.
And this is just an interesting, just to comment on what you said, because I'm also a physician, is that there is growing movement. And even in Pennsylvania, we're working on a committee to engage physicians, healthcare providers. And one of our next webinars in October is going to be with three amazing physicians, pediatricians, who are willing to share their thoughts, including organizations, but mostly about what they feel based on their practice. So stay tuned for that. So Alex, I wanted to thank you for co-moderating together with me. And Richard, this was very powerful, and we'll all get the recording. And thank you for willing to do this, and also for offering to do this again, because I'm sure there's going to be even more people in our next session. And most importantly, thank you for all of you who joined. You will receive this recording. Keep on talking to your neighbors, to your friends, to your colleagues, to your co-parents. These are such important points, and we can't just ignore it. And with that, I just wanted to say thank you again for everybody, and have a good night wherever you are, West Coast, East Coast. We have some visitors from Australia who actually joined us. I think it's morning over there. And thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thanks, everybody. Good night.